So a few years ago, my family and I, we took a trip over to Colorado and I had to spend hundreds of dollars on winter clothes. We had to buy jackets, boots, just you think of it, and we had to get it all brand new because we just simply didn't have it, which is something I really didn't think about when we moved here to Florida. I just did not anticipate ever again needing winter clothes. Hey everyone, my name is Joel and I'm a local real estate agent here in Orlando, Florida. And in this video, I'm going over 5 easily avoidable mistakes that you can make when moving here to Orlando, Florida. Let's go ahead and hop right into it. So mistake number 1 is really just selling off all your winter clothes, especially if you live up north. You probably already have several jackets, maybe some boots. I remember back when I used to live in Virginia and other places that got really cold. We even had leggings and warmers that we would wear under our clothes to keep us warm in those harsh, really cold months. So, I mean, if you're planning on moving down here, I'm telling you right now that it's not worth getting rid of all of it. Yes, it's true. Florida is very hot. In fact, right now at the recording of this video, I mean, it's getting up to be 110 degrees for how it actually feels outside. So definitely, I know that maybe that whole idea of having winter clothes here in Florida doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, mind you, I'm not saying hold on to every piece of winter clothes you have. I'm just saying don't get rid of all of it. I mean, there's a chance, especially if you have friends up north or family, you're probably gonna end up visiting them like I had to just a few years ago. I even remember a few years before that, I actually went over to San Diego and I really went with some light jackets that I had, and it was very cold for me. So again, that's why I would really recommend trying to hold on to as much as you can without it being like something that you have to put into storage, just because you just simply never know when you'll have to go back up north and go into those colder areas. Now, another note I do want to make is that while Florida is really hot, it can get pretty cold here. It actually drops to about 40, maybe even 30 degrees. I can't really remember off the top of my head how low it gets here sometimes. And I know for some of you, especially like everyone that comes from up north, I still have friends up there and they'll laugh at the fact that I think that's actually cold. For them, that's like, you know, weather where you wear shorts and you go running outside. But for us up here, I mean, we're wearing our jeans. I mean, we are sporting our jackets, our sweaters. That's the time that we really get to show off some of our quote unquote winter clothes for here in Florida. So that's another thing to keep in mind. I mean, when you're moving down here, it does get somewhat chilly, and it might be worth also holding on to some of those long sleeves, some of those sweaters that you have that you really like, just because of the fact that it can dip low enough that it could make wearing that kind of clothing bearable. Now, let's go ahead and hop over to mistake number 2, not getting ready for the hot weather down here. So yes, of course, Florida does get very hot. And like I already mentioned, I mean, it gets to be like 110, 115 degrees of how it feels. The humidity is crazy unbearable. It makes going outside just almost not worth it, whether it's in the middle of the day, late afternoon. I mean, it just gets hot when it comes to those really hot summer months between June all the way to, I would say mid-September. But one of the things I do advise people to do if you're planning on moving down here is invest in some dry fit. If you're not the kind of person who likes that kind of texture clothing, you know, dry fit where it feels almost like silk on your body, then it might not be a good option for you. The reason I think, me personally, this is something that I do and I would recommend to others is because it is a little bit refreshing and it helps those hot summer months be a little bit more bearable. I mean, you don't even have to go outside. You could just be in the car and you'll still really feel that hot summer heat. And having clothing like this definitely would help you out a lot. I mean, it's almost like a running joke that we have. We have nice clothes, even dress clothes, polos, that do come in that dry fit kind of lighter material that makes being down here a lot more bearable. At least for me personally, just sharing my experience and how I live down here and how most people I know do, that's kind of the way to go. In fact, you'd be hard pressed not to find people, you know, even if you're wearing slacks for work, that they're not made of some kind of material that is a lot more breathable. And while it does seem kind of silly to make that one of the big tips when you're planning this, you know, large move to Florida, you'd think that there are a lot more important things to worry about. This is just one of those things that could make it a little bit more comfortable depending on who you are. Maybe you really love the hot weather and you're just like, hey, forget it, I'm gonna suffer through it. I enjoy being in the heat, it's not a problem for me, then you'll probably be fine. But if you're someone that just simply gets really uncomfortable quick, this could be a good option to help you out with some of that when you come down here. Now let's move on to mistake number 3, not having an EPass before you get here. Now, of course, this isn't necessarily a mistake as much as just some advice for you when you come down here. You may want to get an EPass. Now, if you're coming from somewhere that doesn't have any toll roads, then I hope you can get ready to adjust for this new reality that you'll have to face. Is down here, we have toll roads, and they're kind of the main avenue for getting around Orlando. And if you don't plan on using them or want to avoid paying for tolls altogether, you'll be stuck in the city roads. And I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, the traffic is abysmal here. It's really bad for a lot of reasons. One of them is just the fact that Orlando's population keeps growing and growing and growing. They keep building apartment complexes just about everywhere they can fit one. I mean, I'm telling you right now, not too long ago, they actually stuck one between a gas station and a neighborhood. And I'm telling you that we thought there was no way they could put anything back there. They found a way to do it. They found a way to stick an entire like 6-7 floor apartment complex with a parking garage right between that neighborhood and that garage. I don't know how that's gonna work out for traffic. I'm almost certain it's gonna make it a lot tougher for everybody. But that's the reality here in Orlando. Housing has been kind of a challenge for us here with how quickly the area is growing, creating a lot of traffic. And so the city roads are gonna be tough to rely on solely if you're planning on getting around, which is why I would really recommend having that EPass ahead of time. It'll save you on gas because you don't have to stop and go so much. It'll save you on money because you'll actually pay a little bit less than actually paying cash for those tolls in most areas would. Along with that, EPass is pretty much accepted throughout the state no matter what kind of expressway you're using. And then, you know, there's also a lot less traffic. Now, mind you, that doesn't mean that there's gonna be no traffic at all. All that means is that it'll be a little bit better, or really a lot better than the city roads. And it's not too hard to get either. In fact, most of the time you can get it for free. You just need to go to the EPass website, sign up for an account, and they'll send you an EPass, and you'll have it, and you'll be ahead of everybody else who's moving down here. Now, mistake number 4, I already talked a little bit about, you know, the fact that you shouldn't throw out all your winter clothes, but at the same time, you shouldn't pack your entire life up and move it down here. I'm telling you right now that depending where you're coming from, I mean, it is already really tough to move. I'll tell you right now, just a personal experience of my own. When I moved out of my first apartment, I rented a very small U-Haul, and I filled the entire thing up with a bunch of junk, stuff that I owned that I ended up getting rid of anyway. In fact, the couch I had at the time did not fit or make sense for our brand new home that we had bought, and we actually ended up having to throw it away altogether when we got our new couches, which was really frustrating because we spent a good amount of money. At least if you have a little bit of foresight and think and plan early enough, I mean, you can start getting rid of some of those things early on. The truth is, unless you buy a home that's exactly like the one you have now, odds are a lot of the furniture you have is just simply not going to work, and it's probably the biggest and heaviest thing. The other thing that does happen often that people tend to forget about, unless you move like every year, is the fact that things just break. I mean, if you have things that are, you know, very sentimental and important for you and value, of course, hold on to those. Make sure that you insure them on the way down here. That way, in case anything happens, you can get it repaired or replaced. Things like that are like essential to do. But if you have a lot of like large furniture, I mean, there's a good chance that it could break anyway on the way down here. The best thing you probably could do is either give it away to a friend or some loved one that you know that lives already near you that could take advantage of these things and you'd be happy giving it away. It could also be a tax write-off. Or simply sell it, and maybe you can have a little bit of seed money for when you get down here. Because I'll tell you what, when you do get down here and you move into the new area or your new home, you're gonna have a lot of different expenses that include buying furniture that makes sense for where you're going to live. And of course, another mistake is simply not starting your research early enough. Now, no matter what, I mean, I don't believe that there is a starting too early when it comes to relocating to any area. Because the truth is, I mean, if you're planning on relocating and traveling a far distance to an area that you just simply don't know, I mean, how could you really begin too early? Especially when it comes to Orlando. Now, Orlando is not the biggest city out there, but it is fairly large and it's fairly diverse when it comes to its offerings for different areas to live in. And not only that, but most people don't consider the greater Orlando area. I mean, Kissimmee, yes, it's its own city, but it still counts as part of the major like Orlando metropolitan area. There's also St. Cloud. There is also Windermere, Winter Garden. There are just so many places that just offer different things, different access to different areas. And really it's gonna come down to what your preferences, your tastes are, and also what your budget is, because, you know, some of those areas are just really, really popular, and that does drive that price point up. The neat thing about some of those areas I just mentioned is that some of them do offer a lower price point when you compare a similar home for different areas here in Orlando to different areas, again, like in Kissimmee or St. Cloud or any of those other areas I mentioned. That's one thing you should also consider when moving down here, is that the fact that they might actually offer a better price. There also might be less congestion in that particular area. So you want to make sure that you are doing some kind of research early on. Just take a look at maybe, price points is a great place to start. I think that's what most people think about, is really what is it going to cost for me to live in this particular area. The next thing to consider, especially if you have kids, hey, think about the schools, start doing a little bit of research. I actually have a whole nother video on just that topic alone, how to research the schools, how to find what schools are zoned for which areas. So I think that's something that could be particularly helpful if you have school-age children. And even if you don't, you might want to still consider looking at the schools, simply because those are huge factors that do drive the price and maintain the value for any particular property when you do end up buying a home. I know for me personally, the different times I've moved in Orlando, I'll be honest, the way I am, I'm very house driven when it comes to homes. I prefer just having the exact perfect home, built out a certain way, having certain kind of amenities and all these other things in the community, which that might be you too. And if that's the case, if that's the most important thing, then that's a great place to start. But for me, I just really had to expand outside of that and start looking at the surrounding areas, because I'll tell you what, there were these great, beautiful homes located in just different areas that builders were building. And I would go there and be like, I would just fall in love with the house. But when I would do a little bit more research, just drive around the community, drive around the area, I would quickly realize that it was pretty far from all the things I like. Whether it was shopping, dining, amenities, entertainment, I was just a little bit further away than I really wanted to be. I love my house now and I love, being at home, but not that much. And I wanted to make sure I still had decent amount of access to all those little things that really made up the rest of my life outside of my house, which is something that I would really recommend for you to do. And if you want to start that research process right now, I would recommend watching this playlist right here, simply because of the fact that it will help start the process, at least kickstart the questions that you need to start asking to really learn what it's like to live in these different areas here in Orlando.